does not look widescreen to me. Hi, Roy. You know John?
No, John. Roy. How are you doing? Stay warm? Trying, yeah. I'm gonna double check on the boilers just in case. You never know with this. Oh, all right.
Question.
I got your email.
You did?
Yes. I figured since I would be seeing you, I wouldn't bother.
You would wait.
I try and get through over.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it's just the same exact thing. It's happened at least this will be the third time. And
Yeah.
so it's just a setting. I know I tried to talk you through it before,
Right.
and you didn't see where I was talking about, but it was.
In Outlook. Is that where you go to make the change in Outlook?
Outlook has nothing to do with your Peninsula.
It's in Picasa that I need to go into.
Peninsula has to be told to watch specific folders that you use.
But there's another issue. It's probably related. Heretofore, when I'm in Picasa and I make a change, I'm working on it, give an image, I change it, I save it to whatever, boom, I get the change in Picasa, it shows up. That's not happening.
So you're saying when you save it and you
Let's
go
say-
back to look at it, it's the original file, it's not the modified file.
I think it's the opposite. If I'm in Picasa and I'm working on a file, and Lightroom has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
If I make a change and save it as, and when I modify an image, and I want to put it back in the original photo file, my machine's photo file, I save it as, and I do a -1 to the number showing that it's the first revision. Invariably, when I do that, every time that I do that, while I'm in Picasa, I save as, I get a little pop-up message that shows that Picasa has changed that image, shows the new number and everything. And if I click on it, the revision will appear right there in a copy.
So it sounds like it's just not launching that folder. That's what it was doing before.
Now, watching which folder?
The folder that you're saving. That's how Picasa does that. It watches folders
Yes.
determined by you for any new files. And when it stops doing that, you stop getting those notifications because it's not watching.
Right. So, but I wouldn't go into.
It doesn't matter what program creates them. It's watching the folder. It could be a Pizza Hut app that's saving a file there.
Yeah.
And if Picasa is not watching, it's not measuring.
Yeah, but my point is, if you said I should go into Lightroom and make the change.
No. I said Picasa.
Oh, okay. Then I'm way out to lunch. I thought I asked you, do I go into Picasa to make the change? And you said no, Lightroom.
You asked me if you go into Outlook to make the change.
Oh,
And I said, not Outlook. Outlook has nothing to do with it. It's Picasa.
got it. Okay, Roy, we are on the same page. So I'll go into Picasa. And I'll click on settings, maybe.
I'll go back and look at the instructions I sent you before.
Okay.
Because it's easier.
I would be more capable, more able to follow that now, I think, as I understand the concept here. Got another issue.
There we go. I suspect.
Is that the guy from?
I think that's Mr. Groover.
Hi, Roy. I don't know if he's seeing it.
He's muted, so. Can you hear us?
Yeah,
All right. We can hear you, but you still appear to be muted.
Now?
Oh, yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
He's seeing his whole room, or what is he?
So he's seeing that little square up at the top. So
Okay,
he's not seeing you, Larry, I don't think,
okay.
but
I'm seeing the room and with all the tables laid out, the chairs, etc.
it's not a perfectly wide field of view, so.
Where's the camera pointed on your?
The camera's.
Oh, it's that one. Okay.
I'm trying to get as much of the room as possible, but
Okay.
that's Larry over in the background.
Hi, Roy.
Larry,
My pleasure.
mine too.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
So do I understand correctly that you're going to you're going to relocate permanently from Pennsylvania to Hillsborough in the spring?
In the fall, apparently right now.
Oh,
Yeah, we're building a workshop on our property and that will not be done until the fall. So
I see.
Wherever you like. I'm not actually running anything other than technology. We're just.
Really?
Are you John?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ann.
Hey, yeah.
Nice to meet
You too. John, Jim McLean.
What's that?
Jim? Oh, Jim.
You must be Ann.
I am.
Hi, Ann. Yeah.
You must be Larry. You must be the only Larry I know.
Really? I'm unique. No, so you're right.
Hey, yeah, I don't know. How you doing?
Good to see you. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
What's new and exciting, anything?
Oh, not a lot.
No? Can I buy a coffee?
Why I like mass growth?
Yeah.
Well, just don't breathe.
What
Ah.
are you gonna do? How does it work? You work up there, you tell me.
The federal government requires masks indoors in public buildings, in federal buildings, so if you want to accept, that's fine.
Is it?
You just gotta-
Do I cut
Otherwise.
a little hole?
No, I wouldn't do that.
I wouldn't do that.
You know, Jim?
How you doing?
Good, good, good. Hello.
Well, hello.
Going in, Papa Squat, wherever, I guess.
Who are you?
Steve Ribble.
Hi, Steve. Larry Peterson. Glad to know you. Glad to know you.
I'm Roy.
Roy Gotts, Winter Harbor,
That's Gigaroid.
and Lane. Lane said,
Gigaroid.
check in with you.
Very good.
Go ahead, name, have a seat.
Very good.
I'm not running things, I just said, my supervisor. This impacts the entire zone, and we're a big part of the peninsula here, so why don't we offer this space and we work together. Lori won't be able to.
I don't know.
She was going to last night. Like, there's too much going on. Yeah, but Susie. She's the development coordinator for Schoodic.
Okay, and does she live in Goldsboro or Winter Harbor?
Right now she lives on campus here.
Oh, okay, so Winter Harbor, technically. Okay, super.
So this is the thing.
Yeah. So you guys haven't really had a community meeting? then?
No, this is the first meeting.
Okay,
I'm actually not a resident of either town, I'm just the IT manager for Schoodic, and I do the computer work for town offices. A lot of people that are funding in the town.
Oh.
Yeah.
I do. And have a car. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. The last one.
And we can talk after this.
Sure.
Here,
We've got Roger Dean, and I'm guessing that's Danny Mitchell.
Yeah, it is. Mr. Mitchell's iPhone. And I'm Mark. Mark Southwick.
Nice to meet you. I'm Roy Gotts.
I saw your profile up on Schoodic, the page, what page? Yeah, like I said, I didn't realize, because like I said, Danny and I worked for 10 years together in the IT department.
Over there.
Yeah, the Jack. So he was like support tech, and he was out dispatching me, and I go all through the campus. And all, so.
Don't tell him, Mark.
Oh. I'm telling stories. It must be Danny.
Yeah, that sounds like Danny.
Don't tell our
I didn't tell all the stories though.
You must have your phone plugged into your truck because you're breaking up.
No, it's just a crappy cell service in Winter Harbor.
Ah,
Rory, is this one of these owl?
This is not an owl, it's
Not
just a
an owl.
camera sitting right here trying to capture as much of the time as possible. But the audio pickup is pretty good.
Yeah.
Larry was talking to Mr. Gruber from the back of the room, so I think he'll do the visual for now. Anyway. If he hasn't, I can always try that.
Yeah, I just know, RSU 20, I'm just trying to figure out what to do for the server because we have no connection. We have nothing, so I'm writing a grant. And hopefully this line will approve it, but I need guidance on what to order. RSU
Well,
24
Okay.
was just saying. It was very basic,
It's just someone to take
but,
time
like,
to snows.
Yeah.
long term, not just a this.
Certainly, if you haven't, I talked to Jen Dennis.
But as far as hierarchy,
She's the IT overseer there.
Yeah, okay.
he's an employee of.
he's so
There you go. Is it assigned to where someplace to sit?
Anywhere, apparently nobody wants to sit on that side. so,
And where's the heat?
I'm gonna go check, see, make sure the boilers.
You'll know a lot more, that's why.
Yeah.
It's a mile an hour.
Right.
I thought
I had all the same questions.
Well, this is an important session, obviously.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi, Larry Peterson.
Larry Peterson,
Yes.
Sandy Ford, Winter Harbor.
Hi, Sandy.
I've seen your
Sandy
name.
what?
Fortin,
I've seen your name too. It sounds familiar.
Irrigation, Maine,
I don't
Media.
know, I might even know you without the mask on. who knows? Yeah,
Are you a veteran?
yeah.
I had spoken at the Veterans Committee a couple of years ago about wellness initiatives. Helped out a few veterans get some funding for.
Oh, yes, that's where I remember your name. I wasn't at the meeting. Hey, Mark, I thought you were gonna be gone. Excuse me.
Were you at?
Yeah, I was at that.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna be gone.
I did too, but the VA, they canceled one of my appointments, the video appointment, of course, Video Connect, and so they shifted everyone down, so I get it.
Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent. Yes, I remember your name from that, I guess.
Okay. Here, someone sitting here. Hello, Ken. Hello, Ken. Hi, Ann. Nice to meet you.
Oh, not much.
I'm Sandy.
Yeah. I didn't say that.
Yeah, just keep on reading all these football.
I'm sorry.
Oh, God, it's the worst.
It's actually
And
pronounced.
everyone's trying to figure out what's gonna happen with the playoffs. And from Buffalo, New York, so now the Patriots are playing Buffalo in Buffalo, so
Well, this is the way it is.
mixed.
I don't think I'll get funding for that. I'm gonna work on something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab that and go around this side. I like to be, alone. What are you doing? Some class? Wow. Yeah, so I'm gonna be up here for about an hour. No, but she's coming out for a little bit and she's gotta leave. Yes, supposedly on. Federal. Yeah, she's headed to a. For her car. 1:30 to go.
Don, you want to be in charge?
If I want to be. Oh, get all of you.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'll tell them to get you. Okay, buddy.
We have talked for a limited amount of time, so. Here we are.
Larry's just coming back, so.
Hey Larry, guess what?
We were all waiting.
Sure. You need not wait any longer.
No, here.
You're right.
Sorry, Roy. It's not my fault. Ann invited me.
I'll remember that.
She should have known better, but
right.
Like those people that take their dogs to other people's parties.
So, Larry, I know you had put together a draft sort of agenda, but Ann pointed out that John has limited time, so you want to just.
Yeah, I think he was first on what I had proposed too. Yeah, John,
Sure.
as far as I'm concerned.
Do you want to do introductions at all?
Good idea.
Mark Sobzak, retired Navy, IT.
Jim McLean, the infrastructure guy for town.
Larry Peterson, Gouldsboro resident, just kind of man about town.
I'm Lee, I'm the office supervisor for the town of Hillsborough and unofficial has started on that.
Steve Ribble, have a house in Gouldsboro, but it's not necessarily mine. And Winter Harbor Broadband Committee.
Winter Harbor residents, also Broadband committee for Winter Harbor and
John Doherty with Mission Broadband, and here, county commissioner's perspective.
Susie Akeford, and I work here at Schoodic Institute. I'm currently living on campus, so I'm looking for a house.
Susie what?
8 cores,
Acord?
yeah, like a cord of wood,
Acord of what?
yeah,
And you're an employee of the sir?
yeah. I am the development coordinator here.
Roy Gott, IT manager for Schoodic Institute. I am neither a resident of Winter Harbor or Gouldsboro, but I have worked IT for the town offices and many people in the community for a number of years. And I'm just here facilitating on behalf of Schoodic in the space. And I saw Eve just walk in, but while we're waiting at people on Zoom,
You say you saw Eve?
She just was walking in.
Eve is walking in.
Oh, good.
Well, I'm on Zoom, Danny Mitchell. I'm resident of the town of Gouldsboro, Board of Selectmen, Winter Harbor Police Chief, kind of an IT guy. So
And I'm Roy Groover, part-time resident of Prospect Harbor, soon to be full-time, and coming to you from Pennsylvania, where I am the retired IT director for Lehigh University and former technical advisor for the Pennsylvania Education and Research Network.
I'm Roger Dean, resident of Prospect Harbor and the editor of the Paul Bunyan Road Association newsletter.
I'm Pat Boggs, resident of Prospect Harbor and retired software executive. Also coming to you through my phone because my internet is down right now.
I'm Susan Bierzacudek, part-time resident of Prospect Harbor, small business owner with some serious internet issues while I am living in Prospect Harbor, coming to you from California right now.
And just a housekeeping detail, this is being recorded, so we'll have that as a record. And probably want to avoid saying anything we'll regret.
I'm Eve Wilkinson, who's part-time manager.
Keep going. Okay. So give you a background of we were Mission Broadband, and then kind of with the Hancock County's Mission Broadband. We started in March of 2019, so almost 3 years ago. Everyone got together and we hired a bunch more since then. The concept of Mission was to try to work with communities across the United States, or out of Anglo, Maine, and help this broadband landscape, try to help solve the issues with broadband gaps, we'll call them, throughout beyond the states and certainly within the state of Maine, down east. So, I'll give you a whole history of the commission, but we won't take up that time today.
Excuse me, it's really hard to hear you on Zoom. Can you be a little bit more clear and loud, please, for us?
I can try.
Where's your microphone?
Thank you.
Microphone is
What's
up
up here,
corner,
maybe?
so do you want to
We
maybe
have the
move
front.
up there? Sure. On this side or that side?
Just a moment, he'll be right there.
Either that or we're gonna take the mask off. All right, how's that?
That seems better so far. Thank you for making the effort.
Okay. So Hancock County Commissioners put out an RFP, to try to hire a consultant to try to help broadband and see what they can do in Hancock County. They are currently looking at ARP money and have set aside a chunk of ARP money to say, hey, can we help expand or help the broadband gaps in Hancock County? So part of our job is a variety of different things that we're doing, but we have created a survey that's on the Hancock County Commissioner's website. And so we're pushing that in all of these meetings, trying to get people to, also put it on their own town websites. And if they have social media, promote it through social media, because what that's going to do is give us a landscape of the folks that, are struggling, what they have, what they don't have. Also involved as part of that survey is a speed test, which is the Connect Maine speed test, so it's consistent. So you can always see those speed test results just by going to the Connect Maine site. That's where it takes you, is a speed test. So we really want to push those two things to start this project, which is the survey and the speed test. So within Hancock County, there are a variety of projects going on already. There are folks that haven't started broadband committees. I'm curious where Gooseboro is, within that. We met with Winter Harbor a couple weeks ago. Is that right? A couple weeks ago. So there are folks that haven't started anything to do with broadband, but they know they want it. They know they want to try to, and fill the gaps where they exist or start new because there's nothing. There are projects that are already going on that are near completion, projects that are halfway in between. And so we've, spoken to the commissioners a few different times now, where every other Tuesday where, we have an agenda item for broadband on there, so you can always listen in. And we've had a couple of public forums, and we can have another one if that helps as we go forward, but it's really trying to get the word out to everybody that's, the commissioners are looking at broadband as a whole. They know they can't solve it with the ARP money that they have, but my point to them is you have enough money to either help solve some projects or really keep projects moving, is where it's at. So as we know, there's lots more money coming, and we can talk about funding during this meeting if you wish. But one of our goals is to really just kind of figure out what there is for broadband and what there isn't, and where are those gaps across Hancock County. So through the survey and through the speed test, that's one way. We're also taking the maps, and we can talk about federal maps and their inaccuracy, if you will. And I can explain, how the 477 data works and census blocks, but we are taking that data to at least get a, kind of an understanding of what the carriers say, which isn't always accurate, as we know. We can overlay the speed test data on that. We can overlay road and map data, right? And just start to get layers of what the county looks like. And so that's
John, is it okay to ask a question?
all the way through.
Okay, did I understand correctly that you're involved right now in trying to find out where broadband exists in Hancock County?
Yes,
So you don't know that answer yet?
we know from a federal level. And so when I say that, you can get maps from federal, you can get maps from the Connect Maine website that show where carriers say that they have broadband. But the challenge with those is they go by census block. And so if a carrier says that I cover a census block, that doesn't mean they cover the entire census block. It means they have service within the census block, but not down every road, so to speak.
Well, that's kind of a confusing situation. I had no idea that it was that sketchy.
Yes,
I thought it would be clearly defined.
no, because The way that the census, the way that the data goes into the fence, it's called the 477 form. And it's self-reported. So everybody that provides broadband across the United States twice a year has to report per census block what they have for services. And it's self-reported. So like I said, they can just say, I have gig internet at the census block, but I might only have it in 10 houses. Right? So that's the challenge. And that's why the speed test data is per location. And so now we can see on a map that this person took a speed test and they're getting, 2/1, or they're getting 10/1, or they're not getting what, they're subscribing to, or what's being touted as deliverable. So that's why that data combined with the survey that we're doing, that's critical. It's critical data.
With the speed test, do you recommend that people do it more than once, maybe over the course of a week, or do you just want to one time?
Yeah, no, they can take it as many times as they want. What's nice about the speed test data that way is it only will record per location, right? So they can take it, like you'll see, you can go look at this area on the Connect Maine map, and it will say, I'll make up numbers, 500 speed tests taken, 100 locations. Okay, so it'll just show it per location. So yes, it's. I encourage multiple speed tests because it gives you a better sampling. Yeah. So from a Hancock County perspective, those are some of the things that we're doing: the mapping, the survey, promoting the speed test, and then really what they've hired us for is when it comes to the ARP money, is to look at projects. And so as your project goes along, and say, hey, you know what, we need X amount of money, and so they would come through us. We would. I'll call it the vetting process. We would vet that project and say, okay, this is a good project. It makes sense. Yes, this money, would recommend, if you will, that money being spent towards that project. And so, like I said, there's different ones going on at different times. So, there's cable company, right? Spectrum is around. They've covered a lot of some towns, but they haven't come some of the roads. And so what some towns are saying, they've talked to Spectrum already and said, hey, you know what, if you come back in and cover these 2 miles, we got what we need. At least we have broadband now.
Excuse me, may I ask a question, please?
Yes.
So for those of us who are not full-time residents, we can't do the speed test there. We know what we've been promised and what our experience is. But if this is time sensitive, there are an awful lot of people who won't be included in these tests. So have you accounted for that in any way?
Yeah, so the survey you can take and fill in that, and we could leave, we talked about that actually at Winter Harbor, the seasonal, is just leaving this information up for, there's no deadline necessarily on this project right now, so that can go into July when people get back, June and
Okay.
July, take tests. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Sure. So from a funding perspective, I use Spectrum as an example. Now there's also, there's challenges with Spectrum and their services and their customer service, and all of that comes into play. So we are determining from a Hancock County perspective, from a commissioner's perspective, this project, we're not going in and evaluating, what do I want to say, but so kind of the financial construct of some of these projects is a good way to look at it. We do that as a consulting and do feasibility studies and all of that, but our job here isn't to get into those that detail level. So I say that because I didn't want people that are in projects going that, already using other consultants. We're not here to replace other consultants. There's a few around. Vaccine does a lot of jobs around here. Brian Lippold, the Casco Bay Advisors, both great people, good projects, right? Our job isn't to replace anybody. Our job is, again, at a 30,000 foot Hancock County level, working with commissioners. They don't have enough money to, I'll say build fiber everywhere, but they do have money that can go towards projects to kind of help it move along. And so other funding sources, right, is Connect Maine for Maine, and they have three different versions of funding. And so if you're just starting a project like this one, I don't know how long this Gouldsboro had a broadband project committee for very long.
No, this is the.
This doesn't even have one yet.
This is okay. All right. So like Winter Harbor, as you're getting into it, right, you might come across some expenses. So Connect Maine has what they call a startup grant. So that's for like a few $1,000s. You can go online and get a startup grant and see if the stuff that you need to do. Their next one is a planning grant, and that can be a little bit more expensive. So as you get into, you could do engineering. Maybe there's some engineering that has to get done. Maybe there's an RFP that needs to go out to say, hey, you know what, for these 3 towns, I want to pull together an RFP that says, okay, and I'm talking about that in a second, but you know, how do we want to do that? And then they have infrastructure grants. So that would be if you've chosen a provider and you want to spend a few tens of thousands of dollars or $100,000 or $1 million or $2 million, that's where the infrastructure grant comes in. And they open these windows at different times during the year. The planning grant currently is available the 1st of every month. So you can just kind of put that in consistently. I'm sorry, the startup grant is every month. The planning grant, they just opened, or there's a window open right now and it closes January 20th. And then the infrastructure grant opened yesterday and it's going to close March 20th. So you guys aren't really in the position for necessarily trying to get a planning grant done or certainly an infrastructure grant. But they will reopen those windows throughout the year. They don't have a schedule, so I can't tell you when. And there's also going to be, you know, that's Connect Maine, who's been around for a while. They're currently run off about $1 million budget, 2 different people that have tried to done that over the last number of years. It's not sufficient. It hasn't been, and everybody knows it. So the taxpayers of the state of Maine approved a $15 million bond a couple of years ago. And so that's the money that Connect Maine now has to spend on these planning grants and infrastructure grants. That money will run out soon. So keep that in mind, so to speak. And then there's the other 2 federal programs that have hit this last year. One of them is being, well, 3 technically. You have the ARP money, right? So every state, every county, and every city and town has a portion of ARP money they can spend. ARP money is pretty general. I look at the town manager, I'm sure she knows. And the broadband is one of the things you can spend it on, and you can spend it on a whole other COVID relief, right? So it's getting spent a variety of different ways. That's at the town level. At the county level, it's the same. There's rules around it. And so we just kind of monitor those rules about broadband and say, okay, how can this get spent so that it matches the broadband rules? So when I talk about our role for the county is from a overall project perspective, or I should say per town project or per multiple town project. We do a vetting process. One of those things we do is bounce it up against ARC, right? Does it meet ARC, right? So if a town is completely covered with fiber, they're not going to get ARC because it doesn't qualify. But unserved, underserved, by definition, and we can talk about that a little bit. That's what we really look at. And does it match? And the final rules just came out this last week for, you know, how ARP can be spent. They had interim final rules for the last year it's been. I don't know how long it's been. And final rules just came out. So now we just kind of, they're in favor of broadband. How's that? So that's good. That's good. And then I call it the King money, Senator King, the Treasury money that has come out. That he wanted specifically for broadband. And that is $126 million that's coming to the state of Maine. And the way that that worked is every state had to apply for that money by December 27th of 21. Maine did. And so that money, you know, will be available this year. The other thing with the state of Maine is we've always had Connect Maine. They now have commissioned a new Maine Connectivity Authority. And so that is the authority that's overseeing that $126 million. And how they're going to do that, we don't know yet. But the way that the Treasury money is working is you had to apply for it. And then now in the first, I'll say quarter, they now have to define how they're going to spend that money. So you need to come up with a grant program and you can either just, you know, come up with these parameters and send it back to the feds and NTIA. No, I take that back. The Treasury are the ones that are covering this capital project. That's out of the Treasury money. And so the rules will come from them. We haven't seen the rules yet. And then connect, you know, whatever Maine Connectivity Authority decides will be those rules wrapped around that. And then the money, you know.
You say Maine is getting 126?
Yeah, 126 million. Yeah, it's roughly there. I've heard 126, 127. It's, yeah, every state in the country got $100 million and then there's a multiplier.
And whose decision Who is the decision authority as to how that money is spent?
The Maine Connectivity Authority. So they oversee now, they put this legislature put them in place because they knew this money was coming. And so now they're, I don't know how Connect Maine folds under them at this, or how they will look. They had, Connect Maine had a meeting yesterday. There's legal lawyer paperwork going back and forth with memorandums of understanding between the two to see who does what, and how they're run, but that's to be determined, so. And then there's the new infrastructure one. So the infrastructure passed. I'm sorry, I should go back to the capital money. The capital money, King's version of that was all for broadband. When it hit the legislative sausage making, it did not say broadband. And so there's other things, I'll say, that that money can be spent for. And so some states are choosing that as well. Maine is not, but there's, I know Rhode Island, I talked to them and they may take half of it and build a hospital or something. So there's variations, but King's intent was for broadband, and that's how Maine's looking at it. So that's good news. And then there's the infrastructure bill. So that just hit, again, $100 million is going to every state. And then another multiplier. The challenge with that multiplier is the feds, back to your question about mapping, will not apply the multiplier until they've figured out mapping across the United States. Because it's been a problem for a long time. When that's going to happen, I have no idea. That could be a year, that could be 2 years. But with that said, that $100 million up front, I'll call it, that technically that is going to be run by NTIA, which is National Telecommunications something Association. They've been around a long time. That money is going to be run by NTIA nationally. They had 6 months to write their rules after the signing of the bill, so that'll be June or July, depending on how Fed count time. And then I don't know if that money is going to be immediately available this year. So in theory, Maine's getting 200+ million in 2022. And how they decide and figure out how that's going to get spent, we don't know yet. But that's kind of the funding model as it sits today. So there's currently Connect Maine money that's available. There's ARPA money that's available within the county and the towns, and where the county itself had said, okay, they're looking at ARPA money and saying, what can we do for these projects? So that's why I'm here. That's my job, is why I'm here. So it's a lot of words, so I'll stop for questions for a second.
Yeah, I was just looking at the NTIA toolkit, Russ. As far as advising, like a group like us, as far as would you be with a consultancy? Would you be providing like a consultancy for setting up a committee?
Yeah, right. So I can work with you to kind of get the committee going.
Right.
Under the Hancock rule, what we're doing for them.
Right.
And so when we talk about how we would do it, people do it differently, right? So we start a committee, we work with helping start a committee. We do a survey, which is already being done with the speed test, already being done, right? So you don't have to worry about those things. You can just tag on to the counties.
Right.
And really what we're trying to do is gather, we call it data gathering. We have public forums, which we've already done, but we can do some very specific ones if you want in the towns. I think that definitely falls under this project that we're doing for the county. And really what you're trying to do is pull out that information from people that what is broadband, right? It's all defined differently, right? Different people have different versions of broadband. So having those surveys and having those public meetings, with the residents and the businesses and say, okay, what's broadband to you? And how do you, and we always ask the 2 questions we really ask is, how do you see your town with broadband in the future? And how do you see a town if nothing happens with broadband in the future? And those are 2 very distinct answers. Right. And then, really, if you're going to start a broadband committee, what you really need to do is what you're doing here is bringing in a variety of people. And then you got to get public because, eventually, even though there's funding available, the funding may not cover everything that you're going to do for a project. And so if it comes down to I'll call it a revenue bond, which is obviously a variety of bonds, but it comes to a revenue bond and it has to come to a vote. If the councils haven't been involved and the town managers haven't been involved and the the town people haven't been involved, it will not pass a vote. We've proven it, it's been proven time and time again. If you know, and that's a process, right? Everybody knows you gotta get everything in front of the council and earlier in the year, and then it's gotta be passed, and then the language has to go out. And then your vote finally comes in November, right? So it's a process, and so you just gotta stay ahead of that process from a communication standpoint. I always say any broadband project is as much a marketing and a PR project as it is an actual, broadband project.
This is my first time attending one of these types of meetings and learning about Maine. Do you have a sense of how far the startup planning and infrastructure grants can take communities and kind of what the timeline of for a typical rural?
Yeah, so through a process, right? So, if it was a single project, a few towns getting together, right? You're gonna do data gathering, the survey, that's always gonna take a few months. And then really what we do is try to build towards what we call an RFP, right, stage. So really what we're trying to do is say, okay, let's get an RFP out of the street for this project. Because then you're gonna know who wants to play, what's the technology they want to use, what's the design, and what's the cost, and what's the time frame, right? So to answer your question quickly, that whole piece through the RFP could be 6 months, could be 8 months, depends on, some of the timing of things in between and the time of year.
The funding that's available through Connect Maine, would that be about half the cost that a town might expect to pay, or would it be 80%?
Yeah, so Connect Maine, when you look at their grants, they, I'll say require, but they appreciate town matching of some type, and that could be anywhere from 20% to 50%, right? If you match 50%, it's a better chance of getting the grant. The less you match, the more they have to put into it. So there is an expectation of towns, for some of that matching. When it gets into the bigger money, right, the millions of dollars, where if you're going to do a whole build out project, there's different levels of matching for that, not 50%. It's a big difference on those. But these smaller ones, I've noticed they go through pretty well when there's a 40 and a 50% match. So, and people are using our money for that. That's definitely what this money, this Hancock County, our money could be used for as well. As you get, the bigger cost, you can do that as well. So that's kind of the process, to bring you through the process. So if you get the RFP, right, and then now you know who wants to play. I'm sorry, I missed this one step. We also interview all the carriers, all the existing carriers in the area, right? So around here, it's going to be Spectrum and CCI, maybe Axiom. Mark will come to the table. The wireless carriers, right? Just to kind of do all of that. Again, we're doing that from the Hancock County perspective. So we're going to continue those conversations. We met with Spectrum earlier this week. We have an invite out to Consolidated. So we're just going to keep talking to the people in the area to see what are they, if they give us their plans, or what are they thinking. Because overall, it's a lot less expensive for the people that are already on the poles, than people that want to build to it. But there's good reason as well, to build your own that time. And we can talk about ownership, operator, right? There's a lot to running an ISP. And that's why they're not everywhere, right? It's expensive to operate a internet service. It really is. We've talked to some of the smaller ISPs, I'll call them, they're national, but they're in the state, and they're like, they'll tell me, they're like, JD, I don't care if you give me, right? If you paid 100% of capital, I still don't want the project because I can't operate it. And so that it's not for the faint of heart, right? These are big projects. And so there's definitely success stories in the state of Maine. Danny Sullivan at Down East, right? There's a few utility district owned projects. And so I'm not saying that they're not doable. They just you've got to do the finance side. You got to really look at the feasibility and the finance, because there's a reason that the carriers haven't done it, which is why we're here, is because of the return on investment, right? So they're but they're owned, and they talk to their stockholders, right? TCI got $500-600 million worth of capital influx, right? So they're a venture capitalist owned company now. Hotelco's the same way. Spectrum's just a big gorilla, right? So everybody has a boss, and everybody has to do a return on investment. And if return on investment isn't there, it doesn't make sense to build, right? Because these companies are in business to make a profit. It's not a bad thing. It runs America. So we just have to keep that in mind. So when it gets down to 10 houses per mile and you get to 5 houses per mile, the cost of the fiber build is the same. You just have less people taking the service. So that's the return on investment. Then that's what they go by. So that's why it's important, obviously, to get the capital influx to help these people. If you want them to private partnership, so to speak, that they're going to build it out. But then you get into ownership models, you get into operator models, and that's a ways down the road, but that's kind of the pieces of it. So if you get to an RFP, you decide who you want. It may be public-private, it may be a utility that you're going to own. You get into negotiations. So from our side, we have to negotiate. It's not with this project, but and then you get to building it out, right? So you need somebody to represent the town to build it out. Mission Broadband plays that role at times. I'm just giving you the scope of everything from soup to nuts. You start where you are today, do some data gathering, try to figure out what's the landscape, what's the broadband landscape, what's the financial landscape, I should say, what's the funding landscape, and do these data gathering points. And just keep moving the ball down. You got to keep meeting. You got to keep talking to the public and see what they say, because we have seen, and it changes, as certainly through the course of a year or two as a project. These are long projects. You may have 4 people on a town council, or 5 people, and you may get a 5-0, 4-0 vote one time. And then the public starts rumbling and talking, and all of a sudden the vote goes to 2-2 or 2-3, and you lose your momentum, and the project stops. So it's very, very important to have that communication with the public and with the council, select board, whatever it is, however your government's set up. Critical piece. So the big thing that I'm here from a Hancock County perspective is to say that we have the survey, we have the speed test out there. We're meeting with individual towns, helping, as in this case, work through the beginnings of a broadband committee. We can certainly come back a few different times. We can have a public forum with you. If you have a project, that at some point that you're saying, hey, you know what, maybe you're going for we'll make it up, a $40,000 Connect Maine grant, and you need some matching money, you could come to the commissioners at that point and say, hey, you know what, can we have some match? And you'll see, because everything is public, obviously, over the next couple of months, we're presenting some larger projects to the commissioners, so you can kind of see how that process is going to work. So that's what I know. And I
A lot
am
more than I do.
I'm here to answer any questions. Certainly.
The question I have is, as far as broadband involvement, are you including, well, you're doing you're doing fiber, you're doing copper, you're doing LTE. Are you including like satellite?
Yeah, so what we look at is, we're, from our perspective, we're technology and vendor neutral. Okay. Do we know them? Do we know what might work? Yes. And so if somebody was going to come in here, and we got one guy that works for us and says, we're not going to let you buy a pig in a poke. Okay. But we know all the technologies and how they work and how they're deployed. Generally what's going to work for you and for your area and for your customers. And part of that comes by defining broadband, right? Because if you want more than what cable can deliver, because when you hear about cable ads, everything talks about they deliver gig. Well, they do. One way, right? The technology will not allow them to do anything more than 30 meg up the other way, 35 meg up the other way. It's just the technology. It's like DSL, right? DSL you can do pretty high speeds on DSL within 100 feet of the CO, right? And I always tell people it's attenuation basically, but it's nobody's fault besides Sir Isaac Newton, because it's physics, right? It's copper, it's electronics, and it's physics. That's all you can do.
Latency.
Yeah, and latency, right? Yep. So yes, there's 5G technology, right? There's satellite technology, there's hybrid coax fiber technology, right? DSL, and certainly fiber to premise. Right?
And it's I just remember before, when it was before consolidated, it was Fairpoint, before that it was Verizon, and Verizon wanted to have a specific number of subscribers before they came in.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So, and when you look at your franchise agreements with cable, that's how they're built. Yeah.
right? They didn't even build cable where there wasn't enough subscribers.
But again, as far as if you're gonna have like multiple, like fiber and, copper together, they're gonna have separate requirements, or is that something that has to be worked out?
That would have to work out. Yeah. Because, Spectrum does a variety of things, but they'll come in and say, hey, you've already got a copper plant, cable, coax plant over here. Maybe we're gonna build new, well, we're gonna build fiber. It's not nothing wrong with that necessarily, besides now all of a sudden you got half your town is fiber and half your town is coax. Yeah, because let me talk about one other thing too. Digital equity is huge, right? There's a big push, and it's also a big push from the federal funding standpoint and from the state funding. So I encourage you to get a hold of Susan Corbett at the National Digital Equity Foundation and have her do a presentation, because she is rock solid on her presentation. And actually, if you want to see it, she is going to do a presentation for the commissioners on Wednesday. The next commissioners meeting is Wednesday. Typically, it's every other Tuesday, but because of the holiday, Monday is Wednesday. And she'll be on at 9 o'clock.
Danny,
So,
Yeah, so about a year ago, I had spoken to the chief operating officer of Consolidated out of Portland. And we were discussing, broadband in the area, and he told me it's about 2 years. I don't know if anybody else has heard this, but when I spoke to him, he told me in about 2 years, they were planning a large scale plan to deliver fiber to every house in the state. Now, again, how long something like that takes, I knew that they were actually starting somewhat down in the southern part of the state, but they were actually moving in that direction. Have you heard anything about that, or have you come across any of that information?
yeah, so they got an influx of cash a couple of years ago, which has stimulated their idea to build out fiber to the premise network. The other piece of cash that they have is called RDOF, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. And so to give you some history of how the FCC has spent billions of dollars over the last decade or so is through this reverse auction, and they call them different versions, but really what they say is by census block, again, because that's the measurement, this census block in this area does not have broadband. So they put a bid out, they call them, it happens every few years, they say, who wants to cover the census block? And it's reverse auction, so who's gonna do it the cheapest? And so that started years ago from dial-up, they went to 4/1 for DSL, and then they went to 10/1, and then they went to 25/3. So really all that's happened is the same companies that got money for 4/1 got money for 10/1. They didn't expand their coverage, they just overbuilt. And then they overbuilt 25/3 on top of 10/1. They haven't really expanded with this money. And then the limitations obviously of copper. So Danny, to answer part of that question, one of the other things we're mapping is that there was an auction last year, and certainly Consolidated put in for that money. And we'll map that out in this area as well, what they won for which areas. So they have money for RDOT, and let me clarify, the money that Consolidated did this time, when they put the bid out, was all for fiber. There's no DSL.
Correct.
So they know they had to do fiber. So all of their bids went for fiber. So RDOF is a chunk of money that they'll get to build out the fiber, and they have 7 years to use that, by the way.
Yeah, he told me he was going to begin in about 2 years. And
Yeah.
that's, and again, that's the only information I know. I've not had any further contact with him since.
Sure.
But he seemed to be pretty open about what their plans were.
Yeah, and that's why we want to bring them to the table, because it changes as time goes on. So then they got that
Well, exactly.
$600 million worth of influx of venture capital money, right? So now they report to venture capital companies. So to somebody's point, there's got to be so many houses per mile that's in there, right? That's in their model. And if it's not there, then they're just going to say no. I don't know that they'll get to 100%. Danny, I haven't heard that one yet at all. They do look at each project kind of specifically. And so that's why I want to bring to the table and say, what's your plans for Hancock County? Right? Do you have a plan down here? So that example of RDOF in federal money, they applied for that. Here's the big change. And I'll go back to the beginning of Mission Broadband, because I'm gonna take a little bit of credit. Because we spent a lot of money and a lot of time in Washington when we started the company, because we knew the problem was return on investment, and we knew that it had to be subsidized. Jim Rogers, who started this company, I started with him. He's been in business for 26 years. He's been on the healthcare side a lot, subsidizing, basically created a company that subsidizes healthcare circuits and equipment across the country. Started in Maine and New England, but so he knew, he shared this idea of Mission Broadband was, okay, let's go figure out federal subsidy. That's what it's going to take. So he shared an idea down in Washington. They said, that's a great idea. Why don't you write a bill? So we spent the first 3 months not knowing anything about writing a bill or a white paper. We did it. We shared it in Washington. We got buy-off from NTIA and from a bunch of 30 other people, that said, hey, this is a good idea. And so our language was stop giving the money to the carriers and give the money to the towns, the political subdivisions. They know where the gaps are, right? So that was kind of the gist of the language in 40 pages or less. And so that language is what you're seeing now. So that is the big shift. That's why you're having these committee meetings, is now what I talked about, you guys applying for money, it's the political subdivision that's going to apply for this $100 million and this $200 million from a state, from a federal, from a county, from a town level, depending on where you are in the United States. So that's a big twist. And so now the carriers are looking at the towns and going, hey, I got to go through you to get to this money. And that is a major league shift. So I tell you that because that language was in there. We actually have one of the signed bills from Senator Collins' office, because they called us, and King's office also thanked us for that legislation, that language. So we'll take a little bit of credit. Our name's not on it. We can take a little bit. So that's the big shift.
To speak a little bit to Danny's question, I sit on the Franklin Broadband Committee where I'm a resident, and our select board chair was talking with Julie Curtis in Eastbrook, and Eastbrook, Danny, may be one of the towns that you're thinking of with Consolidated. They are in the middle of a fiber project with Consolidated, and I believe it is to cover almost the entirety of the town of Eastbrook. So it's not far away, but it is, it's a process. They're a year or so into their process.
Consolidated wholesale, I'll call it, kind of plan with towns, and they've done a lot in New Hampshire in this. They're very open about sharing this information. Is they will work with you and come up with a price, to cover a town, to cover multiple towns, however you want to do it. And then what they do, so when you bid out, when you look at a broadband project build, there's the kind of the backbone, which is everything that runs on the poles. And then there's your drop and your electronics in the house. So from the pole to your house is considered the drop. Then the electronics in the house, and then there's electronics back at a central office. So those are the kind of the rough components of it all. So Consolidated will price it out and say, hey, you know what, it's going to cost $3 million for the backbone. They go to the town and ask them to pay for that. And then it's going to cost another $2 or $3 million for the drops. They put that on themselves. The difference is they own the drops, they own the customer, and they control the pricing. And you cannot use that, even though you are paying for that backbone, you can't use it for anything else but Consolidated.
But at the same time, what type of a burden is that going to lay on the town if the town ends up, subcontracting a private contractor to drop network at every, like fiber, for instance, to every house?
Oh,
and
yeah.
then, of course, then you have repair.
Yes.
That's done.
Yes.
You have trees that come down across lines, take down fiber lines.
That's
And
right.
the last I knew, to weld fiber back together was about $1,200. So again, I think that having a town own that, I mean, granted, I get the fact that if you can own the infrastructure, and then you can sublease or what have you, the service to different companies and keep prices low, but you're going to have a huge infrastructure. Well, because he's in the room, our supervisor of infrastructure would have a heck of a day on a snowstorm or a bad windstorm.
Yeah, it's not, that's what I was saying earlier, right? There's success stories, but it's not for the faint of heart, because it's expensive to operate a network, and those are the reasons.
Oh,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
you pay for every attachment, for every pole, you pay per month. You have to have insurance for that, as well. You've got to carry insurance because of that tree problem, right, as well as liability.
Sure.
Yeah, you've got
Well-
installs, yeah, there's a lot that goes into the feasibility study of running the network. There's no
Even
question.
at the institute right there where you're at, the fiber coming in is owned by Consolidated.
Yep.
And therefore that's what the internet, is provided. However, if, for instance, if the institute wanted to go with the University of Maine as their ISP, then they would get they would have to lease that particular part of the line for this service. And
Yep.
Roy and I had checked that out once.
Yeah, is that through the school and library?
Yes.
Yeah, Jeff Letourneau's done a good job with that, but you're right, if you're gonna lease a pair of fiber, you got two people, it's either gonna be Spectrum or it's gonna be Consolidated in this area, right? They've got fiber, there's fiber all through the down east, it's just not to the premise, right? There's backbone all through the down east, all through Maine. I'll sit here until the day is long, because I worked with companies that we built it. There is as much fiber and technology in the state of Maine as there is in Boston, Los Angeles, I don't care. We've got it up and down, east and west. We absolutely do.
Right.
It's a backbone fiber. It's just not fiber to the premise yet, that's all.
Roy, when the park when they changed the power line over down there and they ran through that tunnel, did they pull an extra coax through for Spectrum?
I don't think they added any coax.
Talking about doing that.
Yeah, actually, everything except the electric lines are just roped to the poles right now, so even Consolidated didn't do their job when they were working on the project, so.
Yeah, so it's yes, Danny, and then so it's been a successful project. So the way that they price it out is, again, you own the backbone, so that's a revenue bond, or somehow you get the money. They do the drops, they own the customers, they're in charge of all the repair for the backbone as well, right? So they take care of everything.
Right.
And then the way the pricing works is they have a set price per customer, depending on the service. And then what they do is they add in, call it $8 to $12 surcharge that they collect every month, and that's what pays the bond back.
Right.
So it's a successful story, and we can definitely connect you with folks in New Hampshire where it's been done the most. The latest one I know has been Long Island, which is an island off the coast of Maine, out off Portland. So they're doing it. They're doing it there right now.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. So a lot to take in for your first broadband committee meeting. But the takeaways would be, keep us in mind, we can come back. Certainly keep talking amongst yourselves about what you think broadband is. Push the survey and push the speed test in your areas. I heard Prospect Harbor was on here, so certainly there. Gouldsboro, Winter Harbor, right? Just keep, try to keep the data gathering going, the communication going with the towns. Put something out in your local, newspaper or coffee shop that says, hey, there is a broadband committee. We recommend on a broadband committee, it sounds like you had a good IT and infrastructure. Certainly, we say reach out to medical and school education. Bring those people in as well, because they're a good mix of people. For a committee, you can get different perspective. We all know education has suffered. It's not a secret, but it's good to hear from the education side. Any other questions? I said a lot. Sorry.
Thanks.
As far as all the information that you have, those resources are, I think Larry mentioned something about if those were available or to be scanned in, the resources. That
You can have them.
Oh,
It's too much to scan.
okay.
It's a lot, and I've compiled it in pieces that are useful. Like I have a lot of the towns that he's talking about that have successfully pulled this off
Right.
have written it all down how to do it. So I've compiled those.
Uh-huh.
I've got various toolkits for each stage.
Okay.
So it sounds daunting right now, but after you dig in for a while and you start reading it, you start to see the
Right.
process.
I was just looking at the NTIA toolkit and it walks you through, and that's why I was asking for like the guidance going through it. There's a lot
I
to-
would, the Broadband Coalition of Maine, if you guys want to be part of that, the Island Institute is also a great resource.
Yeah, I'm a member of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most
I
of
know
the
everybody
resources,
there.
obviously Connect Maine is your resource.
Yeah, Peggy's the head of that,
Yeah.
and she's been a huge help to me.
Yes.
Because she's real good at saying, don't worry about that, don't worry about that, focus on this, focus on
Yeah.
that. And talking to me about how to get those grants.
Yes.
That's the thing.
And I will help you guys, before I moved up here, my background is investment banking and venture capital stuff. I can tell you about the money, I can help you with the money side of it and all that. I will not pretend to be a computer expert or a technology or broadband expert, but I do know what gets funded and what doesn't, and how that process goes down. And how to put lipstick on your pig.
Oh, there we go.
And that's an important thing to know how to do.
Yeah.
I've done RFPs myself,
Yeah, definitely and certainly from a grant perspective.
and I've done RFPs for nonprofits, which is a slightly different animal than a regular kind of corporate
Oh,
finance.
right, RFP, request for proposal.
Yeah.
correct, just so-
So I've done
Yeah.
a couple of those and worked on the financial part
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
That's really my background, is finance, corporate finance,
Wow.
and
This week.
due diligence. I was a VP of due diligence for my firm. So that's the finding of the rocks and wood piles.
Really pretty.
That's very helpful.
I don't do that anymore. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, and when you think about grants, it's like, the startup grants and the planning grants are fairly small from a scope of work perspective, right? They're not huge, but it's the story, right? And so that's, again, the data gathering, you've got a story to tell.
Yeah, the most important part, you guys, John is right. The most important part is marketing and momentum for the marketing. Because if you have the town behind you, first of all, it helps you stay motivated. And since I sit in the town office all day long and take calls from people asking me when we're gonna build a broadband network, I know the interest is there. So you just need to get the word out.
Yeah.
We have already put the speed test and the survey on our town website. So it's just really, and we have a newsletter that goes out every month. So we have the resources, we just need to utilize them.
Yep, right.
And then we just need some excitement,
Yeah,
some
exactly.
motivation.
Yeah. And as you go down that road, you also want to bring in the people that aren't on board, right? That might be having negative spin, because you want to hear that, because that will get to the voters. And so you've got to get that out, and you got to talk about it and understand, okay, yes, what they're saying has some truth to it, but here's what we're gonna do, so we need all the different viewpoints in public.
And you, as a committee member, you're selling all the time. That's always, everybody's job is sell,
Yes.
sell, sell. Because you need that support in the community, especially in the structure of this type of town, the way that things get paid. I mean, the selectmen are on board, especially Danny. He was unofficially kind of put in charge of this,
Yeah.
so.
Very unofficially
Officially.
and against my better judgment.
He tried to run away.
He didn't get out the door.
Yeah,
fast enough.
Dana wouldn't let, he was blocked in by chairs.
But that's, like I said, I've been doing some consultancy work for a friend in Des Moines, where they're going through the same struggle. And she has this multi-million-dollar home, and she was on Consolidated corrupt copper, the corroded copper
Yeah.
connections, and so static and.
Well, I'd like to make a couple of comments here. I'm brand new to this kind of thing, broadband specifically.
Mhm.
Don't know anything about it. I know how to use the internet to a certain extent, and that's the sole size of my previous experience. I've got a background in electronic warfare that has very little to do with this. You mentioned the word daunting, it really is.
It can be, I mean,
It's
give
a-
yourself some time to get. familiar
Yeah,
with
I'm surprised that there is so many unknowns here.
Yeah.
Really, I expected that there would be more terra firma here to work from, to start from, and it's very little, it sounds like.
Well, and that's why, you know, yeah, we know, that's why we're talking to the carriers, we know what's on the poles and who's in the area, if you drive around, tell you who's around, right? But it's getting that information, you know, extracting that from the carriers and extracting it from the public to say, no, I don't have down this road, right?
Yeah.
You just say, well,
Yeah. Maybe this is the time we should talk about what is expected of this committee. What,
Our next step.
yeah, what is expected of the thing?
and I
mean,
do have to run out real quick, I got another one at 1 o'clock, heading down that way.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, John, really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Get us
Thank
going.
you,
We'll be in touch maybe.
sure, Ann has my number,
Okay.
she can get a hold of me, so I can come back,
Okay,
most anytime.
thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so, and you have Zoom if I can't quite make it yet, but
Can I get your card? Because,
assuming I have it.
Email.
Larry,
Yeah.
if I could, I would just want to point out that, you know, we do have Winter Harbor here as well as Goldsboro.
Yeah.
And my, you know, I'm looking at this from an outside perspective. I think any, you know, in Winter Harbor, for broadband to get to Winter Harbor, it's going to go through Goldsboro. It doesn't make sense to really treat these two communities separately, I think. Historically, it is a political, and that's all it is. Technologically, I think it makes sense, and I just wanted to get other people.
Me too.
I think it makes sense for the two towns to really try to operate together in this and with their respective committees. Because right now, we don't have one unified committee, we have two towns with their own committee and forming a committee.
Yeah, but before we get to that, I'm really curious as to what the town of Goldsboro expects of this embryo called a broadband committee. What is the expectation?
so initially, we want to do the pieces where we gather data. That's the first thing, because we can't make a plan. We don't know what we need to do. So we need to get these surveys done, put that up on our website. And it's really gonna come down to gathering that information so that when we move forward on planning, we know we have a better idea of what's gonna work for us. In other words, every plan doesn't fit every town. So that'll give us, it's steps. You're not gonna see the whole picture right now because you're not immersed in it, haven't been looking at it, but over time, you're gonna see it's pretty simple. It's just that the data's never been gathered before. And it's not too hard. We've got, what, 27 miles of road there, boss?
65, 27 town, being technically 65.
So that's where we start.
Not
We start,
private road.
you know, it's baby steps. You start with the basics and you flesh out the plan over time.
And one of the things that
Once
was,
you know what you need, you can figure out how much money.
right, and the other thing with dealing with money was, we was talking about the data inclusiveness, where inclusivity, whatever the term is, whereas there are people that can't afford to pay $60 to $100 for the broadband.
I'm still waiting to hear what is expected of the committee. These are little pieces, I know.
Right.
Baby steps, I understand that concept, and I understand that all things will be revealed in time. But what does the town want of the committee? Is the committee's purpose to
To do the assessment.
yeah, and I'm not even sure I know what the hell an assessment means at this point, but that's how raw I feel, but we are here. So the town expects the committee to take responsibility for putting together plans, do an assessment of availability of broadband capabilities, wherever they are and whatever the source. and then identify which ones are the best, which ones are the cheapest, which ones are the most expensive. I guess I'm
Okay.
probably on the right track, but I
You
don't
are.
know.
And one of the reasons that I compiled all this information for the committee is that a lot of those kind of questions are answered here by towns that are already done. Towns our size, towns with the same problems that we have, and it's step by step of how they did it. The Island Institute is one of them.
Steve and Sandy, how far along are you?
We are light years ahead because we already had this meeting a week ago. We're in the same place.
Ah,
We're
okay.
essentially-
Light years.
It actually might have been a week and a half.
Okay, so you understand where I'm going?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, yeah, no, we're deer in the headlights at the moment.
Okay.
It was helpful to hear, John's, presentation again. It was slightly different, but it was basically the same thing. It was helpful for me. And I think Ann is correct in that, you know, we collectively begin with figuring out what we have so we can figure out what we need. That generates the project of who needs to be connected and where. And I think Larry too, I took the survey in Goldsboro, and several of the questions are, you know, why do you use connectivity? You know, is it for school? Is it for work? Is it for medical uses? You know, entertainment, that kind of thing. How many people in your household use it at one time? One of the things is a speed test, and just 10 houses past the exit of the park here, I got, oh, I don't know, 6.5 download and 0.44 upload speed. I mean, we don't have the connectivity here, and then the more of those we have, then we know that, yeah, East Schoodic Drive has a need. Or, you know, Paul Bunyan has a need, or whatever the different things are, and other ones, Route 1 seems to be okay because it's the main backbone trunk line.
So we're talking like what they used to call war driving, where people, you drive around looking for unsecured routers, so you could use those. So you instead just then you.
Well, I have a house down there, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I did.
Oh, for your own house, yeah, because that's one of the things that I was just looking at, that's the NTIA, they talk about, it's a toolkit is what it is, and it's probably it's on the same lines that basing.
It's in
just-
here. Oh.
There we go, yeah, and it's telling you how to set up the roadmap, how to use the toolkit, planning a community broadband road, assembling a team, the vision, gaps, resources,
Making you the
needs.
broadband manager to do that.
Yeah.
No, I have all of that is in
Yeah,
here.
and that's why I said, that's what I was gonna ask you about,
You know,
what's
as
available.
well as the town for, I don't know if you read, there was an article, A Tale of Two Towns about broadband coming into Leeds and Hampton crashed and burned, and Leeds is soaring.
Wow.
And it all came down to their process, it all came down to ginning up that community support.
Right.
It's really important, and so, you know, as your committee unfolds, you'll see who's got the skill sets and where.
Right.
You know, not everybody's gonna be good at the technical part, that's just a fact, not everybody's gonna be good at the financial part. But some people are just really good at collating data and putting things together that way, and some people are really good with people, and
Right.
that's important. It's just as important as the financial side, it's just as important as the technical side.
So, Roy and Roger on Zoom, either one of you gentlemen like to weigh in?
Not particularly. I'm content to listen.
Well, this is Roy Groover. I appreciated the presentation, and having been through all of this in, a different life, it it's not any simpler than it ever was. And I think it's going to take that, what I believe was Ann was talking about, which is it's going to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And when you throw it all together, I think we can find the strengths that we have within us, along with the resources that have been accumulated to at least get started. And, you know, I'm hoping that once we start, the momentum will help carry us through. It's not going to be an easy task, but these are also just words at this point.
Pat, are you tuned in as a prospective member of the committee or as an interested community member?
Member of the community. I mean, I'm a prospective committee member.
I didn't hear what you said.
Prospective committee members.
Oh, okay. All right.
Like Roy, I have a lot of background in replying to RFPs, and I have a statistics background, so I could help out with the surveys. So I would, as I had left my name and contact information in the town office in October, that I'm very interested in getting broadband service. My husband lost his job when I had my stroke because he couldn't have reliable internet to work remotely when he had to stay here with me. And I'm sure we're not the only case that happened like that. Lost opportunities, lost. It was really hard to tell who was talking because the images are so small on my phone, but somebody was talking about what would be the status in the community with the broad infrastructure improvement, and what would be the status of the community without it. And I think that's a really good question to answer, because it sounded like the consultant was dealing a lot with technical feasibility, but then it'd be interesting to know how many households within the community currently have internet capability at home, and how many who don't have it are interested in getting it if there were a reliable source. I mean, I don't think we know the answers to any of those questions. So I would be enthusiastic about helping out with that, yes.
So to try and get back to what your goal is here, Larry, are you thinking about a purpose for the committee? I think maybe it's easier if we look at if we don't try and come up with a purpose for the committee or an expectation for the committee as it will finish. I think if we treat it in stages, let's say for example, our first thing is to see that the survey is pushed to the extent possible, that we distribute the survey, because the survey is being done by Hancock County. We don't have to do the survey, correct, Anne?
It's on we're doing it.
You're sharing it.
Yeah,
And
we're sharing it.
it's being shared in
But
the
that
community.
data is being collected by the commission.
Right, so they're collecting the data. The survey is already there. We don't have to make the survey. We just, as a committee, have to push it, sell it, and get as many people to participate as possible. And then while he said there's no end date for the survey, maybe as a committee, we want to set a deadline for us to have gathered a certain amount of data to get started with, just to be able to make a start, rather than try and picture the whole thing all at once. Just focus on the data gathering.
Yeah, I think that's important. You know, you don't bite off the whole thing, chew immediately. It's obviously going to be a piecemeal effort. You do a little at a time. But I'm kind of a long range thinker when it comes to organizational things, and I just want to get it. I wanted to get a feel for what the scope of this job will eventually be, and it will be a job, clearly. The more competent people, experienced people we have on the committee, the better, obviously. And there'll be some time dedication to this. So everybody who has signed up to be a potential committee member needs to keep that in mind. This isn't, for example, Mark asked me the other day whether I thought this was going to be a long-term project. And in my And my immediate response was that I didn't think it would be beyond 6 months. How foolish that was. So that shows that I did not have an appreciation for what was involved at all. Not at all, so. And I also like your other comment that when it comes to this technology fusion, if you will, between communities, it very well might require some collaboration.
They have like a Schoodic like committee overall.
Yeah, or something like
Because you're
that.
talking like, again, you're talking different monies supported by different towns, so. there you have separation.
Peninsula.
Yeah.
Based
It is.
thing.
But you're along the same lines, and again, it's gonna have to come through one town to help the other.
A question. I believe there's a comprehensive plan or planning committee that is starting to either gear up or has already. And I'm wondering whether this is an element that is going to, or whether there's any connection or with us, with them, and if there isn't, should there be, or is their timeline too far out, or any comment on that?
That's an excellent point.
Jim. What do you think about
Comprehensively? I don't know where they're at right now, but yeah, it would definitely,
that? I can probably find that out. I spend a lot of time with all the things.
yeah, I mean, it would definitely benefit both committees, I think.
Sure.
You know, it would be questions for the comprehensive committee that they would want to incorporate. And, yeah.
Did you hear that, Roy? Okay.
I was just gonna say a couple of things that have come up from our conversations. Where the survey that's online was designed by Hancock County. I would just suggest that everybody takes a look at that, make sure that it is the answers that you want to get for our region. Where we have summer tourism, there are a lot of different things in our community that doesn't exist for the general Hancock County. John already said that he could do some tweaking on the survey. It's not necessary that it needs to be on that survey. It can be questions that could be asked in the community. And the second thing, and Ian, I think you may have gotten this one also, was the Island Institute process. I think that's exactly what you're asking about, is what is the process to
I
get
have
these
that one
committees
too.
going?
All
So that it's available and there's a whole, it's just a matter of going through and kind of checking off who are the key people. Absolutely having somebody from education and healthcare. I was just contacted Wolfboro and Northern Light to find out what, and maybe somebody in your community is a good outreach for health at the doctor's office, and he said he got dropped from his Zoom, an important Zoom meeting. The doctor at Wolfboro Clinic can't even, be doing telehealth. So that, and RSU 24 adult education is also very willing to be involved if there's not other educational folks that are involved.
Good points, very good points.
Yeah.
How many people are on your committee? Three?
Four.
Four.
Yeah,
We recruited one.
conscripted somebody.
Yeah, four. And
Yeah, and also to your question, or actually Roy's question about at least how I personally look at the broadband component of the comprehensive plan, is that it is a focus area, just as housing or infrastructure or recreation or natural resources will be. So I see it as the broadband committee would advise or present to the comprehensive planning committee what they feel is important for the comp plan committee to incorporate as they see fit.
Yes, makes sense.
And my understanding of comprehensive planning also is that it's a 1.5 to 2 year process, which I envision this is probably going to be going right alongside with it, if not taking longer. Hopefully not longer.
I think broadband is a subset of comprehensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's just something that requires a lot of detailed gathering and behavior. Pursuing. you have those. The long term, as far as Winter Harbor and Hillsborough go, everybody wins the broadband. You know, good luck selling a house with no internet. That's right. You know, and if you point that out to people, they'll change their attitude if they, you know, don't want to care about it. It's just a fact. We have to be connected nowadays.
Well, there will still be people that will not want to be connected.
Sure, and they don't have to.
Being off the grid and conservation lands that we have in our region is very, it's a high rate of conservation. So getting that input is important as well.
So Danny, are you there? No, he's not there.
Come on,
He's gone.
he's on mission.
So let's say that that this committee forms, I'm still feeling things out. I haven't decided what my involvement is going to be yet, right? Maybe there are others who share that.
I've actually got people all the time that are now contacting me to find out about getting in this committee.
Oh,
I just
really?
wanted to, today was originally just gonna be, I was just gonna be with John, and then you guys expressed an interest, which is awesome. So that's how we got to all be here. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
we're taking those first faltering steps towards finding our way,
sure,
you know,
sure.
and I think it'll get easier and it'll get clearer to you over time. I mean, if you have a tactical mind, obviously, you're doing electronic warfare. So you'll see it, it'll start to
My
unfold.
mind, I kill people in my mind. That's why it's like.
You gotta find it first. But you know what I'm saying? It'll get easier and more, you'll be able to see the road more clearly as you get up to speed on what we're trying to do.
And again, what I'd like to do is look at all those, the information you have. And
Finally.
I can always drop it back off at the office.
Yeah, I mean, this is for you guys,
Oh, okay.
so, and it has a lot of different stuff.
Yep.
From soup to nuts.
Cool.
You got the city of Port Collins, which did an entire wireless communications plan, that's the big one, and then all the main stuff. would be-
So Roy, Groover, excuse me, you mentioned that you've been down this road before.
Yeah, I've done it a number of times, both within a campus and then throughout the state of Pennsylvania, but obviously not by myself.
Given our situations, we're kind of fragmented in a sense. You're there, we're here. What could you lend to what you've heard so far today? What could you lend in the near term in terms of assistance, participation?
Well, I mean, I think I agree 100% with getting the data so we know the extensiveness. I mean, we can't propose, we can't write an RFP, we can't, you know, do much of anything other than maybe ask for a startup or a planning grant until we know what our universe is. And also, I mean, I think we need to do everything we can to get out, to alert all of the people, both who you know, are full-time residents and those of us right now who are part-time residents, to get out and do that survey information so we can, the faster we have that and the more accurate it is from the greater part of our universe, you know, that will, I don't say fast track because it never is going to be a fast track, but having that baseline information is essential. And the sooner we can get it, the better.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if we have, how we can reach out to folks who maybe are part-time residents, or if we're interested in doing that because they're taxpayers too. And whether we should be doing some other kind of outreach to them, other, you know, besides putting it on the website and maybe in the newsletter. But, you know, figuring that out, I think, will be an important step forward.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges in this community, is outreach, getting feedback, timely feedback, or feedback at all in some cases, in many cases, concerning any given objective or project. So I agree with you. You got to start with data collection, and in terms of the population, who has it, who doesn't, and a number of other questions. I haven't taken the survey myself, and I haven't even seen it, but that's gonna be the first thing that I do.
Yeah.
And think about its applicability to the entire community and how we can ask the community to participate. That's what you had in mind, Roy.
I think that's where we have to start. And also for those who aren't aware, one of the other hats that I wear, I'm Franklin's board member for RSU 24, and I currently chair the RSU 24 board. So I have some ties into education as well. So so would that make sense? People to sort of define the committee's responsibility, the goal is, at least initially, as that.
Well, I really want the town. I really need the town to be concise and accurate as to what the expectations are. It can be a paragraph, but the words that were used before were good words, assist in analysis and towards what objective. And everybody here, many are familiar with statements of work. So I see this as what I'm asking for is some kind of a statement of work. So the committee has some guidance.
Yeah.
As to what it
We're
needs
kind
to
of at
do.
the letter of intent stage.
That's
moving
right.
Towards the statement of work.
That's right.
Because even since this kind of got handed off to me, and I know how to start a plan, run a plan, make a plan happen, but I, just like you, I don't know all the pieces yet. What are all the pieces of the puzzle? What is everything that we need to put together? That's why I'm offering my time to kind of help get you guys on the road, like we spoke about. And just with the understanding that my time during the day belongs to the town. And after that, I'm definitely open to helping to push some of this forward and do some of the legwork that I can do as a town employee. You know, kind of coordinating your guys' efforts with other committees, selectmen, town manager, whatever you need. But I think that at this stage, in terms of being able to define exactly what you're going to do, you're actually going to do that. You know, you're going to do a big part of that because in terms of assisting, who you're assisting is the consultant right now because they're gathering that data for the county, and we are part of that county.
You see, now I didn't even catch that. If you were to ask me, what do you think this committee's objective is? In terms of assisting in particular, I would have said to assist the town.
Now, right now, the county's hired well paid Hancock County, nice chunks of money, so we need to jump on board and take advantage of their consultant while we have them. That's why I got John involved with us, because I want to get as much free information out of them, tools that they're already using for the county, so that we can use them in Goldsboro, not reinvent the wheel, and use our time wisely. Because all you guys are retired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm semi-retired,
And
but I have a
I
full-time
gotta
job.
tell you, that at this point, considering the disparate pieces of this thing, both,
It's day one.
yeah, but
It's day
I
one.
understand that, but please allow me
Yeah.
to speak my mind here. And that is, I would have liked to have seen the town invest in some kind of a paid consultant to get this rolling. I'm certainly not in a position to lead this committee. I'm not. I can take bits and pieces and help out. But who's going to chair this thing? I'm not going to chair it because it's too big for me to handle. I don't have the time. I don't have the time to do it. I don't have the bandwidth.
I think that person will. you'll begin to see who that person is. Leaders emerge.
Yeah, well,
And like I said, we're day one, we're barely having the first meeting. So
okay,
I think,
okay, if there are no larger expectations than what you're getting today, then I guess we're on track.
I mean, there is no expectation yet. You'll define, you'll determine what we need. And at the point that we can determine what we need is when we can determine what we need to do. And once we determine what we need to do, we can figure out where those contributions will come from, who can do what are we able to do as a committee? What do we need? I mean, you know, part of what planning grants are for is hiring consultants. So let's get through the startup grant, which will give you some walking around money to do some more surveys, to get the community involved.
Planning grant,
Planning grant.
that's the first.
Yeah, that's the first step, so you go for
opportunity for
$1,000 so that you're not coming out of pocket for anything.
Have you guys gotten along that road at all?
We, in our initial meeting, we talked about maybe we should hire a consultant. And that's as far as we got
Yeah.
to guide us.
Yeah, that's what comes to my mind immediately.
Excuse me.
Yes.
The person who was speaking, I think it was the consultant, when he was giving the planning, the startup, the infrastructure deadlines, I think he said that first one, that startup deadline was, I could hardly hear what he said. It was something like January 20th.
No, the startup grants are every,
Deadline for,
they're every month for
First
startup
of every
grants.
month.
So it's a rolling process of, I mean, the money is available all the time, and then the windows open up for a certain period, then they close and a new window opens up. Startup grants, which is the very first step, are every month.
will you be sharing any kind of documentation or PowerPoint from his presentation?
I just handed off the documents to Mark.
Yes.
So Mark has some of that, and then if you go on to maine.gov/connect Maine, connect ME, it's a wonderful resource with so much information about that part of the process. And there's all kinds of recorded sessions that they've done, Q&A sessions about funding and filling out those applications. It's pretty simple because it's designed to be done at the community level. It's not set up like an RFP is a complicated, huge document. Okay, the grant forms are not. They're designed to be done by towns. You know, they're not. There's not an expectation that it's going to be at a master's of business finance level. But what they want to know is that we've gathered the information that we need and that we have some idea of what to do to move forward. And that's why I think it's valuable to use the resources of other towns that have done it, that have successfully done it, and have thrown in the towns that have not successfully done it so that you know where the pitfalls are and where the problems are.
So are you planning on sharing the consultant's documents with those of us who were on Zoom, or what is the plan for that?
We can't do it because it's all paper and it hasn't been scanned digitally. There are several binders and packets of documents that Ann has put together over time.
Pat, if you want to email me, I can send you, I can help you and send some stuff. Are you the one that's are you out of town?
No, I live in Prospect Harbor.
Okay.
But my question isn't about all the massive volumes of data on the web or that has been collected. It's really very small request. Is the consultant had a presentation and I wondered if we can get the information from his presentation.
Oh, no.
His presentation was verbal.
He summarized.
Yeah, we have a recording of it.
I mean, he summarized the information.
I can send you a link to the recording if you like.
Thank you.
Yeah, how does that work? How does that record?
Oh,
I call Roy and say, hey, how do
and you have to be
That's
the
what I do.
administrator.
What's
The
that?
administrator, you can record it, And I do this for a session, and what I did is I sent it overseas to get a transcription of it. So they took the whole thing and transcribed it, and it was very accurate, with very few things. It was, I mean, it's syntax errors.
Is it a free?
That wasn't, the transcription wasn't, but the Zoom session's free. And it's small audio file, and you can send it, or you can put it up like a Dropbox.
Oh.
Up in the cloud.
Like all the town meetings,
Okay.
all the
All
select
of them,
meetings are recorded too.
Okay.
You can listen at your.
I'm sorry, I have a question about, I think the other Roy, if I can refer to him, is that mentioned that I think he's the head of the the school board district.
Yes.
Okay, so essentially then we have a part of that, some representation from education. And on the Connect Maine site, they list a whole bunch of potential stakeholders who should be involved. But I haven't heard that we have anyone from healthcare, which is a big, in my mind, a really big, important piece, some kind of representation, either soon or before we go into the RFP stage,
Yeah. That's the stage that you're in right now with this committee. It's assembling all those, all your stakeholders, all your shareholders.
Do we have anyone from healthcare at this point?
No, but
Okay,
I'm with Healthy Acadia, so I'm happy to reach out to others. I've already put a reach out to Northern Light and Goldsboro Clinic. I also wonder about Danny Mitchell with bringing in just first aid, first responders. We have lots of folks doing safety work in the community, so it may be somebody closer than Northern Light.
But I think it's more like telemed and things like that that we're looking for. A need, as opposed to a first aid,
Well,
first responder person.
they're still responding with technology. But that would be my suggestion. I'm happy to reach out to figure out if anybody else has suggestions in the community that.
Yep,
I'll keep
thank
working
you.
down one
I
rabbit
think
hole.
everybody should do, I mean, use your intuition. You're all very smart, educated, managed to live to adulthood. So, follow your intuition, follow your leads. You'll know if it's a good one or not as you get down the road. And I know I'm finding more and more people interested in this project as I get into it. As I get into it and people find out and I give presentations at selected meetings, people are reaching out to me, which is great because, Roy, I think I met you over the phone. Didn't I call you off of or you called me?
Yes.
I don't remember how we met. And I was like, and you bring a lot to the party too with your background. And there's people like that everywhere in this community. And it's just a matter of going out and finding it. And everybody benefits from broadband, and that's going to be an important piece is putting together that, marketing kind of stuff. Why is this important to you? In sales, we say, find the pain. Everybody's got it somewhere.
Okay, what
do they need?
What has been communicated to the environment thus far? I know there was an article in the paper that the Tish Ball did. That was a good start, but I don't recall seeing any kind of a flyer from the town office or from the selectmen that announces the formation of a committee.
It was at the meeting.
It was like,
At the meeting. Do you watch the meetings?
no, but I'm talking about paperwork, a document that is sent out to every household in the town.
The newsletter goes out once a month. So
Yeah.
the things that I asked to put in, the first thing that went out in the newsletter was about the survey.
Okay.
So
That
if
did
you,
go out in the.
yeah, went out in the
Okay.
newsletter. And also, I have given now 2 updates at the select meeting. So I think it's probably worthwhile, if you don't go to the meeting, but watch it on Zoom or watch the recording or listen to the recording.
Yeah, I was there.
But we're, like I said, these are the first steps that we're taking. I've spent a lot of my time putting that together, figuring out, learning about it myself.
Yeah.
Because I can't help you if I don't know what I'm talking about. So, I know a lot about starting businesses and getting the process going, but I don't specifically know how to build broadband network, but people do it, so clearly it can be done.
Has anything been said in the newsletter that you're speaking about? Was there a request for all members of all households to participate in the survey? The site
Yeah,
was
we asked them.
identified. This was in our town newsletter? Okay. I don't recall.
And it will continue to be, I'm trying to get a whole section just for broadband. But I mean, the selectmen just gave the go ahead 1 or 2 meetings ago. It was formed a committee. So that's when I started that. It's literally been in the last month.
Okay. All right.
So that may be why, you know, and we've been through the holidays and all that.
Yeah, well,
But it's gonna pick up some momentum because now I have the bit between my teeth.
There we go.
Hello.
And it's on the website, it's at the top of there, it'll ask you about the survey, to take the survey.
Yeah, well, maybe I have to concur with everybody's comments thus far about focusing on first things first. And that appears to be getting this profile of the community developed. So we know what our baseline is right now concerning who has it, who doesn't. Yeah.
And you guys are, you know, you're community leaders and people know you guys. And the selectmen too. If everybody's pushing it, it's gonna go.
Well, pushing it.
In terms of getting people to take the surveys, getting people to get involved.
Yeah, what I'm driving at though is that the methodology that's employed in pushing them to do that. There has to be a pretty comprehensive approach.
Right, but it's organic. I mean, you know,
I
if
feel like
someone respects you, Larry, they're gonna, and you say, hey, we want you to do this survey. We're trying to get a feel for the coverage in the town. This is important. Spread it around, tell everybody you know. I mean, it really starts that way.
starting a conversation, I think, how you brought up, how is it with broadband today and what would that look like in 10 years or down the road? I think that very basic opening conversation with somebody to say, what do you think? And this is why we're doing it.
Yeah, it's, like I said, it's an internet age, especially now with, you know, I would say post-COVID, but during COVID.
Yeah.
You're seeing all these remote learning and meetings, and I had my annual physical done and 7 video sessions. And it's very good out of Togus, and so I had all those were good. But then I've had sessions with Northern Lights, the telehealth that's like it's unfaulted.
So Winter Harbor folks, you came today, just what was your driver showing up today?
We've been talking,
Oh,
and we
you're
know
talking.
connectivity comes through Hillsborough, so you can't not talk.
They're in Highland District.
I was just.
Yeah, that makes sense, and,
Yeah.
and we have property here in
In
Goldsboro,
both, yeah.
so we have property in both towns.
Wow.
Oh,
So,
are you married?
no,
No.
she has a place in Winter Harbor, I have a place here.
Okay.
And I live in Millbridge where we have 5G.
Okay.
And that was a process.
So who chose your committee?
But we don't have a website.
I don't think we've defined
We
it.
nominate, we
But you got a
literally have a
park.
You got your little park.
I
Yeah.
put out an agenda and
health
just said, let's
And
get
you're- yeah,
together
you're
and
theater
figure out what we're.
coming up.
I'm always here, so I don't know. I guess I don't know.
The town of Winter Harbor also does not have a descriptive, it was literally a month ago, the select board said we would like to have a committee, several of us raised our hands and we formed a committee, we don't have a title list of what our
Okay.
requirements are.
Because a month and a few days before that, the county came to all the towns and said, hey, we got this consultant, we're trying to do all this, so
Okay.
everybody's in that cluster of.
Startup.
And my
Yeah,
boss.
the dust is flying and we're trying to figure out what it is. I think for you town administrative type people, personally, I think it makes all the sense in the world that it's a concerted effort. But I also know that there's a lot of history with people that have lived here for a lot of years and generations, and it's not always easy to work together. So I don't know what the best method of, you know, is it a handshake, a letter of understanding or something between the two select boards saying, hey, we think this would be a great idea. And who starts that conversation? I don't know.
I mean, I'll talk to myself. see where we want to go, but I mean.
Mexico.
Where's Danny?
Where's Danny?
He's a good one to bridge this gap.
But you know, so is Dana and everybody else because they are.
Well, I know,
They
it's
know
just that,
everybody. You know, so it's
Danny's
okay.
connection with the other side.
We agree with everybody. That's what-
I agree.
So,
That's why we're here.
so is that what you're gonna do, Ann? You're gonna take this back and present it to the selectmen as perhaps the best way forward is to
We've already talked
collaborate?
about it.
You already have?
Yeah, because she and I have been talking for a couple
Okay.
weeks, and so, and Danny, obviously I work for Danny, so he's a selectman. And so we've already been looking at this, it's just really been a matter of getting everybody together,
Okay.
and so then Roy was able to pull this together, so I mean, I think we have. been doing something.
So should we then think of ourselves as one going forward?
I wouldn't officially do that until.
No, unofficially.
Our bosses.
Yeah, unofficially.
I mean, unofficially.
Well, it's fine with me.
I know my bosses are on board.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody here has any power to bless anything as being official.
Right.
But I'm certainly.
Right, but it's selling the idea, just like you're talking about selling the survey, it's selling the idea in our respective administrations, so we should be working together.
I would suggest, unless, I mean, I get the sense that this committee feels like the two towns logically should work together on this, unless somebody on the committee felt differently. I think it would be good to just get a request to the select board of Winter Harbor and Gouldsboro separately saying, we think it makes sense to work together. Can you give us that blessing to operate as one committee?
I was texting with our CEO, he was asking about an update, and so he is advocating that we work together as a peninsula.
I mean, I can't imagine wires with.
The only, the
Only
only,
is an island inside of Goldsboro, so I don't know.
We're gonna have a
I don't know how you're gonna
separate
do it without.
fiber cord.
You're gonna run it under the ocean.
It's been done.
They're coming from Bar Harbor, they're close enough. to
That's
the
how they
islands.
do the island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Cranberry Islands.
That is a potential solution we could look at.
So-
I was gonna say, the only
I don't
thing
think
that I
it's cheap.
look at is, under, because I literally have no idea and haven't been on the Connect Maine site, just if any of the grant opportunities are population based, or like what they would require for match funding or that sort of thing, that's the only
Absolutely,
thing.
it's based on service.
Yeah.
It's
Okay,
based on providing service to people that don't have service.
but I mean, so, yeah, so where does that help and where does that hurt? Because sometimes when you have higher populations or whatever, then you might be required to have like a larger, like, match or, you know. something.
Yes,
I don't think we're gonna tip that.
This type
Yeah,
of
that's what
funding,
it seems
the
fun.
projects and the funding that we're going after is designed for rural Maine.
Yep.
So rural Maine is not Portland, it's not Bangor, it's us, not
Right.
rural.
I would also add to that, we're not just rural Maine, we are a tourist season
Right.
that really expands. I tried to hone in with John about that. We're a little bit different.
Right, but the whole coast, you can say that along the coast.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
So, Portland and all that, I mean, that's kind of the.
Well, and when John presented to us, we did talk about this, and he said most definitely a concerted effort would be a favorable grant approach. You know, if each of the communities was putting in for a separate grant, they may both get them, but if together we put in for
Yeah, we
a
have more
grant,
power.
we have a lot more power because it's a bigger
Or leverage.
constituency, but you know, the agreement of all the people.
Right. It's free to quote.
There you go.
Now, that being said, I don't know how that impacts the town manager to give an approval for writing for the startup for our town, because we have no connectivity to our funds. We don't even have a single.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that impacts. that
Yeah, there
first
are
grant.
details.
Yeah, so there's that financial detail, and again, we're not official. So I've
I
already
think,
started.
let's get this committee to scheduling a next meeting, and that's gonna be on the next steps, and in the interim, if you guys can look at this, and I mean, when you look through that, it's gonna be so much more to you, and you're gonna understand so much more.
And it, just from what I
But you can't sleep.
read through it, and I've gone through like Connect Maine, I've gone through the NTIA, and they're all saying the same mantra, the same mantra. This is how you set up committee, this is how you, this is your vision, visual planning and.
And in there somewhere is a little thing called, you know, the makings of a broadband manager. Who's good at running like this? So look to that. You may have somebody already, and not realize it. Like, I think actually Roy's would be a great resource. 'Cause
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Bet,
his
yeah,
wheelhouse
on the
right
road.
now.
Yeah.
So. And I gave you guys a spreadsheet with everybody's numbers and emails, and I gave you an added list.
Right,
You should
and I
probably
made
reach
a
out to
copy
them.
of it. This is, you want to put this back up on the.
Keep it all together, though, all that stuff together, and if you could reach out to those people.
Okay.
That would be
Well,
So you guys let me know, and, I think it would probably be helpful to have maybe down the road, in the ways, to have our own kind of newsletter for the marketing aspect of this. You have to keep the momentum going.
Right.
So you're talking like a additional for the newsletter, just have another sheet on.
Yeah, just
Okay.
whatever, even if we do it online.
Yeah.
Which really is not that practical, since the problem is that we don't have enough internet.
And, yeah.
I think you'd almost have to have a hard copy.
All right.
But we'll talk about it home. Look through what that stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, if there are people that, you know, like you have phones as well as so much of internet that they have on phones, so you've got like Facebook and.
Yeah.
Reddit.
I mean, the town has a Facebook, it hasn't really been kept up lately, but we could start it again. If that
Yeah.
helps.
It's nice for like small stuff in this, and you see it, the police department's putting up more stuff, trying to rival the Bangor place.
Well, I'm in the town office, so. if anybody
Hey.
has any-
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Was that? Yes, sir. I'm personally, just, we got to walk the process. No, right there. That's it. Should be more than enough now. Damn, you cheated this. I know, I was, had an idea what I'm doing here. Take care.
I think it makes a lot of sense.
It's very intense. It's also really fun.
At the same time, do both of those out. And I was thinking that and we lost our same people, but anyways, I was thinking that, you know, he may want to, especially with the documents that Anne has, we'll start schooling all of it and trying to share it, but I think, you know, maybe if we can't work as one entity, it makes sense just to set up a Google account for everything to distribute the documents. You know, we want to, we can take our meetings and if we're recording them and have a YouTube channel, basically, to show the process. Anybody wants to look at it.
Shutting down the system or the.
No, I get to click on, oh, Danny said he had to leave.
So Larry,
Yes.
I'm really great at reaching out to people. I've been reaching out